My fiancée threw the ring at me and left with another guy. 2 years later, it hurts her to see me with the life she wanted. I'm a 29-year-old man, and I met my ex-fiancée, Chloe, who is now 26, in a way that seems straight out of an absurd comedy. It was 2 a.m., and I was in the library, staring blankly after spending 12 continuous hours coding. That's when this girl, with perfectly styled hair and a coffee cup in hand, tripped and spilled her latte all over my laptop. Anyone else would have reacted badly, but I simply told her, well, at least my code has flavor now. Instead of running away, she laughed. We spent 4 years together, the last 8 months engaged. 4 years believing we had something real. I proposed to her with a ring I had saved up for half a year. She accepted. She cried tears of joy and uploaded photos to social media with captions about forever. She used to come to my third-floor apartment, a tiny place about 60 square meters. The building had character, which is the elegant way of saying everything was broken, and the landlord didn't care, but Chloe seemed to love it. We decorated with string lights bought at a discount store and posters I had collected over the years, and there was my cat. Pixel, of course. That's what I named him. He was a rescued tabby with the annoying habit of knocking everything off surfaces, but every night he would snuggle up between us. Chloe said she was more of a dog person, but I would catch her talking to Pixel when she thought I wasn't listening. Her family, however, never fully accepted me. They didn't openly say they despised me, but their attitude was clear. Her mother would shoot me disdainful looks, and her father would ask about my little computer project, in a tone similar to what you'd use to talk about a child's imaginary friend. Family gatherings were like a theatrical performance where I was both the audience and the target of the jokes. The funny thing is, back then, Chloe seemed different. She used to scoff at her parents' elitist world. She said she didn't care about money or status. We would eat Chinese food on my futon, watching series on a computer that took 5 minutes to load. She told me none of that mattered, but in the end, it turned out to be empty words. The first crack in our relationship appeared 6 months before the end. Her college roommate was getting married. I saved for months to rent a decent tuxedo and buy a wedding gift. I thought it would be fun, a kind of preview of our own celebration. But when we arrived at the event, I felt like I had entered another world. There were ice sculptures, a live orchestra, and champagne that surely cost more than my monthly groceries. Everyone looked like magazine models, and I felt out of place. Chloe, on the other hand, moved with ease. She chatted with former classmates about their jobs at big firms, luxurious apartments, and vacations abroad. I barely held a drink, trying to maintain conversations that ended as soon as I mentioned I worked at a startup. Although I had asked not to sit with her college friends, we ended up sharing a table with her parents' friends, older, wealthy people who spent the entire dinner talking about investments and real estate. I tried to explain my venture in simple terms, but one of them laughed and said, "Still playing with computers? It's time to get a real job. Especially now that you're getting married, you need to grow up." The worst part was that Chloe didn't defend me. She just seemed embarrassed and changed the subject. When we talked in the car, she told me I was too sensitive and should have just gone with the flow. The next sign came a few weeks later. Her mother invited me for coffee alone. We went to an exclusive cafe in her area, where a simple coffee cost $8 and everyone seemed to be closing major deals. She arrived late, dressed in designer clothes, with no apologies, and got straight to the point. "I've been thinking about your situation," as if my life were a problem that required intervention. She pulled out a folder with job offers, basic positions at banks and insurance companies, desk jobs that honestly would have extinguished everything I'm passionate about. "These are real careers," she said, sliding the papers toward me with benefits, retirement plans, and stability. She talked about starting from the bottom, like her older son had. I was speechless. She wanted me to give up my dream to become a claims adjuster. She looked at me as if I were a child refusing to eat vegetables. "You must be realistic. Chloe needs security, not fantasies." The conversation went downhill fast. Phrases like, "when you mature," and "she needs a provider, not a dreamer," made me feel small. The worst part was that when I told Chloe everything, she wasn't annoyed or surprised. She just said, "She's doing it for your own good. Could you at least look at those offers as a plan B?" That's when I knew everything was already contaminated. The beginning of the end came at a dinner she described as relaxed family time. She asked me to wear a blazer. When we arrived at her house, or rather her estate, I realized it wouldn't be intimate at all. The driveway was full of luxury cars. My old Honda Civic, with its dented bumper and the check engine light on for years, looked like a joke. But it wasn't just family. Her father had invited partners and their sons, guys who looked straight out of a LinkedIn ad, educated at elite universities, with internships at major firms, children of people who golf with politicians, the kind of people who use summering as an everyday verb. The conversations were like a rehearsed scene: investments, European vacations, properties. And there I was, remembering that my most recent purchase had been name-brand cereal instead of the generic one. And then the targeted questions began. It was as if he had planned everything with a surgeon's precision. "And are you still working on that little technology project?" Chloe's father asked with a smile full of skepticism. "It's a startup," I corrected, trying not to sound defensive. "We're in the initial phase, but we're moving forward steadily." I didn't mention that our last meeting with investors had been a disaster, nor that my partner Jake and I had been working over 80 hours a week trying to fix a bug that made the prototype crash every time someone uploaded a file over 50 megabytes. Technically, the project was a time bomb, and financially we were on the verge of collapse. One of his friends, that guy with the impeccable smile and a magazine tan in the middle of February, let out a little laugh as if I had said the earth was flat. "Technology is so unstable these days. Are you sure it's worth it?" "Maybe a plan B wouldn't hurt," he said with a condescension so thick it seemed like butter. And then came what hurt me the most. Chloe said absolutely nothing to defend me. Normally, she would have intervened, saying something about how passionate I was, or how much she believed in what we were building. But this time, she simply stayed silent. Then he appeared. Chloe's mother introduced him as if he had just descended from heaven. His name was Brody, and he had just been promoted to junior partner at a renowned corporate law firm, a Princeton graduate with a JD. An example of excellence. Brody was everything I was not. Tall, well-dressed, in a tailor-made suit, and probably without ever having to check his bank account before buying a coffee. He talked about his latest bonus as if discussing the weather. He spoke of his new apartment in the expensive part of the city, his 5-year plan to become a senior partner. And Chloe looked at him as if hypnotized, asking him questions, laughing at his insipid jokes, and showing more interest in his job at one dinner than she had ever shown in mine. Every one of her questions felt like a tiny stab. I barely spoke 10 words all night. Every time I tried to participate, they let me talk for a few seconds before redirecting the conversation toward Brody's achievements or any other outsider's success story. I watched Chloe turn into someone I didn't know. The same person who used to mock pretentious people now seemed like one of them. When we returned to my apartment, her attitude had changed. She complained about the broken elevator that hadn't worked for months. She frowned when Pixel, my cat, jumped onto the bed, even though she used to love him. She commented that the bathroom was small, as if seeing the place for the first time. At that moment, I knew something was broken. What I didn't know was how quickly she would make it official. A week later, she showed up at my door after leaving her job at the marketing company that a friend of her father's had secured for her without the need for interviews. She was still dressed in office clothes. She sat across from me at the small IKEA table where we had shared impromptu dinners, played games with friends, and talked about the future. "We need to talk," she said, and I knew she had rehearsed it. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what I want, about what I need." I already guessed the direction, but I let her continue. "I love you, but I need stability. I can't keep waiting for you to stabilize. My family made me see that I need someone who is already at that point, someone who can offer me the life I deserve." "Someone like Brody," I said bluntly. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. "Yes, someone like him." And then she stopped pretending. "I tried to adapt," she said, pointing contemptuously at my apartment, as if it were a reflection of my failure. I really tried, but I can't keep pretending that this is the life I want. Living in a dilapidated building, worrying about money, dating someone who can't invite me to a decent place. The same person who claimed to love our simple nights at home, who swore that material things didn't matter. You're 29 and still playing with computers like you're 19. Brody has an apartment downtown. He takes me to restaurants where they greet him by name. He doesn't have to save for months to buy a decent ring. That last sentence hit me. I had worked double shifts for 6 months to buy that ring. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was genuine, and I was proud of it. Wow, I didn't know you thought that. 4 years, and you tell me now, Chloe. Why did you waste so much time? I gave you 4 years to change, to be someone worth staying with, but you're still the same broke dreamer I met in college, just older now, and that's pathetic. We argued. The tension escalated until she did something I will never forget. She ripped the ring off her finger and threw it at me. It bounced off my chest and fell to the floor. "Take your cheap ring," she said with contempt. "Brody is already talking about buying me a real one from Tiffany's, not something that looks like it's on sale." I looked at the ring on the floor, the one she had received with tears of happiness, the one that represented everything I had imagined building with her. Do you know what's pathetic? Pretending you love someone while you're actually waiting for them to become someone else. Pretending you don't care about superficial things, when you can't even admit who you really are from the beginning. She flushed with anger. At least I'm not wasting my life chasing impossible dreams. "You're right," I replied, picking the ring up from the floor. "You're not wasting your life. You're just wasting mine." She stood up, grabbed her purse, and before leaving, she threw her final dart. "Brody is picking me up at 8. She wanted me to know she was going straight from breaking off our engagement to going out with her upgrade." "Good for you both," I said as I opened the door for her. "I wish you all the happiness in the world." 2 days later, she was officially with Brody on Instagram. There they were, at a luxury resort, in matching outfits. His arm around her waist, her smiling as if everything was in its right place. The photo caption, "Found my forever." Meanwhile, I was still sleeping on the side of the bed we shared. I kept finding her hair ties in the most unexpected places. Half of her things were still in my apartment because she hadn't had time to pick them up, and the ring remained on my dresser, reminding me every day how naive I had been to believe in a forever. I wish I could say I channeled my pain into immediate success, that I founded a big tech company and pushed through with determination. But that only happens in movies. The reality is messier, more chaotic. I completely fell apart. Our startup collapsed just a month after the breakup. Investors withdrew after the prototype failed miserably during the presentation, which was supposed to be our big launch. The application crashed 3 times in the first 5 minutes, and when it finally managed to work, it was so slow that everyone in the room started checking their phones out of boredom. 2 weeks later, Jake, my partner and co-founder, accepted a position at Microsoft. I don't blame him. He had student loans to pay and a girlfriend who, unlike mine, did support his career. I, on the other hand, was left completely alone with a stalled company, a lease I couldn't afford, and my savings vanishing faster than free snacks at a college event. I had to give up the apartment. It was my friend Kyle who saved me. We had known each other since freshman year of college. He never fully understood what I saw in Chloe, but he was always on my side anyway. His apartment was even smaller than mine, a studio where the living room also served as an office. But without me asking, he cleared half his closet and offered the small guest area to me and Pixel, my cat. I remember his reaction when I arrived with my whole life crammed into garbage bags. Bro, I always knew she was too demanding, but seriously, she told you the ring was cheap? That ring had cost me more than his car, although of course his car was practically junk. But still, that comment was his way of showing me support, a true friend. Meanwhile, Chloe's new dream life unfolded on social media, as if it were a perfect showcase. Vacations in places I only knew from movies, dinners at restaurants so expensive they didn't even show the prices on the menu. Every post seemed like a direct message. This is what I deserve, something you never could have given me. But the lowest blow came when I ran into Chloe and her new boyfriend Brody at a downtown coffee shop. I was picking up an Uber Eats order. That's how different my life was at that moment. The car's air conditioning had been broken for 3 months, and with the windows down and the heat almost 35 degrees, I was sweating onto the few clean clothes I still had. I had been working for over 10 hours and still had several orders to meet the day's goal. And there they were, sitting outside, looking like they were straight out of a perfect life catalog. Chloe had a new haircut, one of those that look casual but, cost a fortune and require hours of styling. Brody wore sunglasses that were probably worth more than all my clothes combined. They were laughing, holding hands, posing as the ideal couple. Brody saw me first. Well, look who's still delivering food," he said with a venomous smile, loud enough for everyone to hear. That wasn't a coincidence. He was enjoying humiliating me. Chloe looked up, saw me standing there in my wrinkled Uber Eats shirt and a bag of food that cost more than I had spent in an entire week. For a second, I thought I noticed something on her face. Doubt, remorse, I don't know. But then she immediately smiled. That condescending smile suffocated me. I didn't say anything. I took the bag and turned around. Just as I walked away, I heard Brody's voice saying, "I think we dodged a bullet, huh?" Followed by Chloe's laughter. That instant broke me inside. The suffocating heat, the sweat sticking to my skin, the mockery from those who used to be my world. That was the last day I allowed myself to be treated like a failure. That night, I returned to Kyle's apartment, deleted all my social media, and told him what had happened. His response, "That guy looks like the type who thinks mayonnaise is spicy." And then he added, laughing, "It's time you showed them how the real world works." That's where my transformation began. I completely cut off everything that was dragging me down. Social media, distractions, self-pity, and toxic people. I went into a total rebuilding mode, as if my life depended on it. Sleep was a luxury I could barely afford. 4 hours a night if I was lucky. During the day, I made deliveries. At night, I worked at a supermarket stocking shelves, and every free second I invested in rebuilding my startup from scratch. But this time, I did it intelligently. No more empty speeches and half-baked ideas for investors. I learned to work with what I had, to build something real before asking anyone for money. Nor did I trust just anyone again. My circle narrowed to Kyle and a couple of friends who proved they were there when everything fell apart. Kyle was a fundamental pillar. He brought me coffee when I coded late at night. He made sure I ate something other than just protein bars and never complained that his living room looked like a laboratory in the middle of a war. He even helped me get my first corporate clients through his contacts. He never asked for anything in return, he just wanted to see me succeed. For 2 years, I disappeared from Chloe's radar. I had no idea what she was doing or who she was with. And to be honest, I stopped caring. While she was playing the perfect life with Brody, I was working harder than I had ever imagined. The new idea for the company stemmed from the previous failure. Instead of creating another consumer app with aspirations of changing the world, I focused on B2B software, specifically AI-based contract analysis tools for law firms. Kyle's reaction was epic. So basically, you're developing a program that replaces lawyers. You're going to save the world and get revenge at the same time. Comic book villain level. It was a boring, unglamorous project, nothing worthy of social media, but it solved a real problem. I myself had suffered from it when trying to understand legal contracts when I started my first company. Small firms were drowning in paperwork. Our tool could read and detect critical clauses in seconds, and best of all, people were willing to pay for it. Everything changed suddenly. A small article in a specialized magazine, a review from a satisfied customer, and word of mouth did the rest. Suddenly, clients didn't need us to look for them. They found us. My team was extraordinary. Committed people who believed in the vision as much as I did, who became family. Even Jake showed up at that stage wanting to come back. He told me that Microsoft was fine, but he missed the energy of a startup. I told him we were covered, not out of resentment, but because the team I had now was solid. Within months, we were growing rapidly. We closed a contract with one of the 5 most important law firms in the country, which attracted more contracts, more prestige, and more investors. The company, which had started in Kyle's living room, opened offices in London and Singapore. We were expanding globally and shaking up an industry that had been functioning the same way for decades. And the irony was that the biggest change we drove was in the field of corporate law, exactly the area where Brody worked. Our tools were automating the tasks of junior lawyers, the very tasks that launched his career. When I realized that, Kyle nearly choked on his coffee, laughing. "You're telling me your company is taking jobs away from elite lawyers like that clown? And he doesn't even know it." The first time I saw Chloe again was at an industry conference, not as an attendee, but as the keynote speaker. A year ago, I wouldn't have even been able to afford the ticket. Now, I was on the main stage talking about how artificial intelligence was transforming legal services in front of an audience full of investors and senior executives. After my presentation, while greeting people interested in doing business, I recognized Chloe's parents across the room. Their faces said it all. Her mother stood motionless with her glass halfway to her lips, and her father, who had once mocked my tech project during a dinner, gave me a slow nod, heavy with respect. And then I saw her. Chloe was standing to the side, static, looking at me as if she had seen a ghost. She looked different. Still attractive, yes, but she no longer radiated the carefree confidence she used to show on her social media. Something in her had been extinguished. We didn't exchange words. We didn't even try to approach each other, but I could clearly see the exact moment she realized who I was now. The guy she had left for being a supposed failure was, at that moment, more successful than anyone in her social circle. I remember Kyle's text when I told him, "She had that look of someone who just realized she lost the opportunity of a lifetime. Please tell me you saw it." Since that night, everything started moving fast. In certain circles, news travels quickly, especially when someone goes from nothing to success. Within a couple of weeks after that conference, invitations to events I had never heard of started arriving. One of them came directly from Chloe's father. He invited me in person. I accepted, not to seek approval, but because I knew what they were really looking for: to associate themselves with my success. I arrived late on purpose. Upon entering, I saw her, immediately next to Brody. He looked exhausted, tense, with the look of someone who knows his world is collapsing but can't do anything to stop it. He clung to his phone as if his stability depended on it. His firm was losing clients at an alarming rate to companies like mine. Traditional firms could no longer compete against AI-driven efficiency. Old methods were becoming obsolete, and those who couldn't adapt were destined to disappear. Brody perhaps still didn't know that I was the source of his problems, but he was feeling them acutely. Chloe, on the other hand, did know. When our eyes met, I saw the same expression as at the previous event, only intensified: pure, unrestrained regret. A week later, she texted me. I had deleted her number long ago, but the message still came through. "Hi, it's been a while. I was wondering if we could talk one of these days just to catch up." I didn't reply. Then she did something more desperate. She showed up at my office. It was late. The team had already left, and I was finishing some emails when the security guard called to inform me that a woman was asking to see me. He didn't need to describe her. I hesitated between asking him to escort her out or receiving her. In the end, I decided to let her up. This was the moment I had unknowingly been preparing for since the day she left. She walked in with hesitant steps, observing the modern furniture, the awards on the wall, all so different from the tiny apartment we once shared. There was no longer any trace of the confidence that characterized her. Instead, a nervous tension I had never seen in her. "Hi," she said with a sad smile. "It's been a while." I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and didn't reply. I just watched her shift uncomfortably. She took a deep breath. "I made a mistake about everything. I listened to my family and destroyed what we had. She bit her lip, waiting for a reaction. I miss you. I miss what we were. What we were? I asked without moving a muscle. She nodded immediately, a spark of hope in her eyes. I know I hurt you, but maybe we could try again. I looked at her in silence for a few seconds before letting out a laugh, not mocking or bitter. It was simply funny to me. Start over, I repeated. Us. It ended the day you decided they were worth more than me. She looked away, hurt. You didn't want me when I had nothing. You didn't trust me when I needed it most. You left me for someone with more money and called me a failure. But now that things have changed, now you're interested in coming back. Her face tightened as every word took effect. I stood up slowly, calmly buttoning my jacket. Chloe, I don't think about you. I don't miss you. And I assure you, I don't need you. Just then, my office door opened. It was Sarah, my girlfriend, a brilliant product designer I met at a conference when my company was still operating out of Kyle's apartment. A woman who was intelligent, strong, beautiful, and completely the opposite of Chloe's superficial image. Chloe went pale. I turned to Sarah and smiled warmly. Then I turned back to Chloe. I found someone who was on my level. It turns out it wasn't you. I walked her to the elevator and watched as the doors closed. I felt neither euphoria nor revenge, just the tranquility of having closed a chapter that had ended years ago. But that wasn't the end. It was just the first move in a much larger game. A few weeks later, the rumors started circulating. Brody's firm was on the verge of collapse. Our AI-driven system was replacing traditional legal services at an alarming speed. We were faster, cheaper, more accurate. We did in minutes what they charged for in hours. The traditional partners were losing control. Instead of adapting, they made desperate decisions, which only worsened their situation. I knew from industry colleagues that Brody was at his limit. Workdays over 90 hours, yelling at employees, and a desperate attempt to retain major clients. Kyle, as always, had the perfect line. So, the guy who mocked you for playing with computers is now being destroyed by them. Investors began pulling out their money. They considered Brody's firm to be a fossil incapable of surviving in a modern environment. The best part is that he still hadn't figured out that I was responsible for the debacle. While Brody was crumbling, Chloe's parents went into damage control mode. The same people who had treated me for years as a loser unworthy of their daughter began to seek contact. Her mother sent me kind emails congratulating me on my achievements. Her father spoke about me in interviews, calling me one of the most promising entrepreneurs of the decade. They invited me to events disguised as networking opportunities. I didn't respond to anything until her father called me directly. I answered purely out of curiosity. His tone was warm, friendly. We should talk, son, about business, partnerships. Let bygones be bygones. I let him talk first about synergies, potential collaborations, a shared future, but I already knew where that conversation would end. Look, I know Chloe made a mistake. We all know it. But she hasn't been doing well lately. And I think if the two of you would just sit down and... I hung up before he finished the sentence. There were no apologies or admissions of guilt, just a blatant attempt to save face. That was the last time I answered any of their calls. The moment Brody finally understood who was behind his downfall was simply impeccable. I was participating in another industry conference, this time as a panelist, in a discussion about the future of artificial intelligence in the legal field. In the middle of the conversation, the CEO of a renowned firm publicly praised my company. He said, "The truth is, these guys are revolutionizing the market. Even the big traditional firms are struggling to keep up." The camera panned to the audience, and there was Brody, with a pale face, wide eyes, and an expression that was a mix of bewilderment and sudden understanding. In that instant, he knew that I wasn't just his ex's failed ex-boyfriend. I was the man who was dismantling his career piece by piece. That same night, he had a breakdown. I received a text from a mutual acquaintance. "Bro, Brody just lost it in a partner meeting." You have to hear this. Apparently, during a strategic session with his entire team, one of the senior partners held up my company as an example of what they needed to face if they wanted to remain competitive. Brody lost control, yelling that I was nothing more than a lucky fraud, that my company would collapse, that traditional law would always prevail. The problem was that everyone looked at him as if he had lost his mind. It was then that they realized he no longer represented the future. That place now belonged to me, but I still had one last move. Months later, my company was about to close its most ambitious acquisition, a smaller but heavily influential law firm and a direct competitor to Brody's firm. It wasn't just a business transaction, it was a checkmate. Once the deal closed, we began to poach several of Brody's most important clients. In less than 6 months, his firm had no choice but to merge with a larger company to avoid disappearing. Brody went from junior partner to just another employee, likely doing the same basic work he used to boast about escaping. The golden boy, who had everything handed to him, ended up as just another lawyer, trying not to fall behind in an industry that no longer had room for him. But the story wasn't over yet. 3 weeks after his firm's official merger, Chloe appeared at my office again. This time she was a different person. She was no longer the serene, hopeful woman I once knew. What I saw in front of me was pure desperation. It was a Friday evening, close to 7 p.m. Most of the team had left to enjoy the start of the weekend, but I had stayed to review some contracts. I received a call from the security guard. He sounded hesitant. "Sir, there's a woman here. She's quite distraught. She says she needs to see you urgently." "Let her up," I replied. I already suspected who it was. When the elevator doors opened, it was hard to recognize her. She was no longer the well-groomed and elegant woman she used to be. Her hair was messy, her makeup smeared as if she had been crying, and she wore wrinkled jeans and a sweater. I had never seen her so casual, not even when we were together. "Thank God you're here," she said, entering without waiting for an invitation. I received a call from the security guard. He sounded hesitant. "Sir, there's a woman here. She's quite distraught. Says she needs to see you urgently." "Let her up," I replied. I already suspected who it was. When the elevator doors opened, it was hard to recognize Chloe. She was no longer the groomed and elegant woman she used to be. Her hair was messy, her makeup smeared as if she had been crying, and she was wearing wrinkled jeans and a sweater. I had never seen her look so informal, not even when we were together. "Thank God you're here," she said, entering without waiting for an invitation. "I've called you. I've texted you. Why won't you answer me?" I remained seated. "Calm down, because we have nothing to talk about, Chloe." "Yes, we do," she said, almost shouting. "I left him. I broke up with Brody. We're not together anymore." I raised an eyebrow without uttering a word. His firm collapsed. He lost everything and blamed me. He said it was all because I left you, that I ruined both our lives. She started pacing nervously around the office. "So, it's over. I'm fed up. I'm happy for you," I replied coldly. She stopped and looked straight at me. "Don't you get it? I'm free now. We can start over." I was about to laugh. "Start over?" "I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "The biggest one of my life. I never should have left you. You were right about everything. My family, Brody, everything. But I'm here now, and I choose you." She approached my desk, her eyes full of desperation. "I know you still love me. What we had was real. Real love doesn't disappear." "You're right," I said, standing up. "True love doesn't disappear, but what we had wasn't it." Her face crumpled. "That's not true. You left me as soon as something better came along. That's not love. That's convenience." "I was confused. My family was pressuring me. I was young. I made a foolish mistake." "You were 26, Chloe. You weren't a child." Then she began to cry uncontrollably. "Please, I'm begging you, I have nothing left. Even my parents won't answer my calls. I only have you. You are nothing to me," I said without emotion. "Besides, I'm with someone else. You have to move on." She grabbed my arm as if her life depended on it. "I was wrong about the ring. It was beautiful. I was just scared. I firmly pulled her hand away. No. But she insisted. I'll do anything. I'll change. I'll work at anything. Just please, give me another chance. I love you. I always loved you. No, Chloe, go, she screamed. You don't understand. It was just one mistake. One. You can't punish me forever. I picked up the phone and called security. What are you doing? Don't call security. She lunged for the phone to stop me. Don't you dare! I easily brushed her aside and dialed. I need someone to escort a visitor out of my office. You're a fool! She shouted. I loved you! I gave you the best years of my life! Tony, the guard, arrived immediately. Ma'am, I need you to come with me, please. You don't understand, she yelled at Tony. Then she turned back to me. I'm giving you everything my whole life. How can you reject that? I watched her without saying a word. Tony escorted her toward the elevator as her screams faded down the hallway. She's only with you for your money. When you realize it, it'll be too late. And then you'll remember that I really loved you, was the last thing she screamed before the doors closed behind her. I stood there for a moment, looking at the blank screen of my computer. I felt neither anger nor sadness, just a firm calmness, as if a long, exhausting chapter of my life had finally closed. I took out my phone and sent a message to Kyle. Chloe came to the office, had an episode, was escorted out. A disaster. He replied instantly. Again. What was she expecting? A happy ending with violins and fireworks. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because there was more truth in that comment than in the entire last conversation with Chloe. What she was looking for no longer existed. What I was to her was no longer me, and what she once represented to me was buried a long time ago. The true victory wasn't watching her fall. It was standing back up myself. I kept working with my head held high and without looking back.